And a good morning to all of you guys. Welcome to yet another The Chattering Magpie Read Along. And we are forging ahead with Persuasion. I wanted to put some kind of nautical some phrase in there, but I was like, I'm just gonna mess it up. So okay, we're just continuing on with our with our Persuasion read along. Happy to see you guys already on the chat, quite lively and active. Hello. Again, thank you for joining me, even though today's a little bit earlier than usual, just, but happy that you're here. So let me just say hello to the early gang. We have Akihana, who was the first. Hello, how are you, Akihana? However, because the time zone is about to hit the haze soon, so probably right now you're deep in Schlaftrum's realm, so may you have sweet dreams and may you enjoy the replay. Who else do we have? But you do say, therefore, I look forward to how the idiotic and undeniably indeniable couple will interact with this new live session. Oh my goodness. What we had in the last read along was just the beginning. You will continue to see some of the stuff. Now, I know Red Tempest earlier on said a little bit missed the last read along. Don't worry, I will fill you in on what you need to know for this one. But anyway, I do hope that you enjoy the replay, Akihana, and I do also look forward to this afternoon's, well, for you it's tomorrow morning, but this afternoon's chit chat for the Blue Castle, because we are recording part 2. So yeah, hope to see you there. Also, Red Tempest says, again, like I said before, I didn't get the chance to finish the previous live stream. Should I stay and listen or not? I told you to stay. I would do a TLDR for you, and I promised to do it. I'm a woman of my word. And I see you did, after all, stay. I'm glad that you were able to stay. Happy to see you here. Also, we got Teal. Teal, darling, says, I'm captain of my own destiny. Oh man, Teal, I wish you could just do some writing for me, because you're so good with finding ways to incorporate seas and ponds, and yeah, I love it. Okay, fine. That's all I had to say. I'm captain of my own destiny, so it was late when I went to bed. Worth 5 measly hours in the end, but I wouldn't miss this. Aw, thank you. Aw. Do try to get some rest, though. You can listen while you're in bed or snuggling or whatever. And if you fall asleep, it's okay. Just take care of yourself. But I'm, of course, overjoyed to see you here. And I hope you enjoy it. We have Crusher. Hey, how are you, Crusher? Yes, it is earlier today. I hope you can stick around. Okay, you're gonna be stealth watching today. Awesome. Happy that you're here. And also we have Red Tempest. Yeah, he says he was persuaded to stay, so he'll stay. Yes. Little Butterfly, hello, darling. How are you? Happy to see you. As ever. So you guys, it's been only 2 days. We did our read along on Monday, and then now today we're gonna continue on. We're gonna do another 2 chapters, I believe. Depends on how long the first chapter is. I think it's around the same length as the other ones. So I'll just do a TLDR version of what happened in the last read along. So book-wise, the main story is, for those of you who are joining here and never read Persuasion, it's basically a girl who was rich or from a rich family got engaged to a young man who was barely starting out in his career as a naval officer. But because he had no money and her family thought he had little prospects, they persuaded her to break it up with him. So she did. She broke off their engagement. He went off to sea in anger to try to, find his fortune there. And he did do well. He became very, very rich and became a captain. And meanwhile, Anne, she kind of lost her spring beauty. She faded, and now she's a withered old hag of 27 years old. So now it's been 7 or 8 years since they break up. Now they reunite again in vastly different circumstances. She's now the daughter of an impoverished baronet because her father squandered all his money. She's lost her bloom. She's still single. At 27, she's a disgrace of a woman. And then, you didn't get married. What a disgrace. And then he comes back. And he's none the worse for the years. He actually looks, more energetic. Time has done him favors. Let's just say that he's charming. And now all the girls in the neighborhood, they're like, oh, Miss Captain Wentworth. So they're all gonna start throwing themselves at him. But so in the last read along, how did Anne and Wentworth meet? So we talked about how they met. So at first Anne just clung to any excuse to avoid seeing him. So there was a little boy who fell off a tree, and she's like, I'll nurse him while the parents go and visit and say hello. I'll stay back. I don't want to go. I'll just look after the child. Meanwhile, he would just try to also avoid her, or at least not have any direct conversation with her, but in his conversations with the people around him, sometimes Anne, who listens and who has been forced to at last join in society, she can tell that he throws some indirects her way, about just his past and stuff like that. But meanwhile, nobody knows that they at one point, nobody, and I mean nobody here in this congregation of people knows that they were at one point engaged. Anyway, last read along, like I said before, they met. They're doing this awkward dance to avoid each other, and when they have to be in the same room, they don't talk to each other. And the only thing she can do, she's already a wallflower. The only thing she can do is just observe from a distance all the goings on, while Wentworth just basks in everybody's admiration and regard. So, in this read-along, we are going to now see what the effect of Captain Wentworth being in this new society has on the girls in this town, especially the Musgrove girls, you guys. So I hope you guys enjoy it. Yes, Red Tempest, it was a secret engagement. It wasn't actually secret. It's just that she talked about it with her father and her older sister. They both deemed the connection too inferior, too insignificant, too degrading to even consider. So they were very cold. And then when she told another friend, Lady Russell, about it, she's the one that told them, nah, break it up. And she did break it up. So since it was just between the only people that knew, they're no longer around, or they left or whatever, nobody else knew about the engagement. So they didn't actually advertise the fact that they had formed a connection. Nobody else knew. Little Butterfly says, to be 27 again. Right, but in this age, when people live to be, 60 years old, if they were lucky, 27 is quite a big chunk of life. So, yeah, it's unfortunately right now with how we are now able to live past 80, 90 maybe, 27 is spring chicken. But at least that's what I consider, since I'm already past 27. So to me, she's just a baby. But anyway, different times, All right, so let's get started reading the next chapter in Red Tempest. They covered up the engagement and got rid of people who knew. Oh my gosh. Well, they didn't get rid of people who knew. The only people who knew, they just left for Bath. Her father and her sister, they left for another town. And Lady Russell, she went to visit some relatives, so she's still away. So it wasn't because you make it sound so sinister, like they dug up their graves in the garden. No, it wasn't that sinister. All right, Red Tempest, I'll leave you to your own imagination because you have a very vivid one. Meanwhile, we will just read the book. You're already writing Persuasion and zombies or something. All right, write your own fanfic. Let me know how it works out. Okay, let's continue on with Persuasion chapter 9. Captain Wentworth was home. No, sorry. Again. Captain Wentworth was come to Kellynch as to a home, so to stay as long as he liked, being as thoroughly the object of the Admiral's fraternal kindness as of his wife's. He had intended, on first arriving, to proceed very soon into Shropshire, and visit the brother settled in that country. But the attractions of Uppercross induced him to put this off. There was so much of friendliness, and of flattery, and of everything most bewitching in his reception there. The old were so hospitable, the young so agreeable, that he could not but resolve to remain where he was, and take all the charms and perfections of Edward's wife upon credit a little longer. It was soon Uppercross with him almost every day. The Musgroves could hardly be more ready to invite him than he to come, particularly in the morning, when he had no companion at home, for the Admiral and Mrs. Croft were generally out of doors together, interesting themselves in their new possessions, their grass and their sheep, and dawdling about in a way not endurable to a third person, or driving out in a gig, lately added to their establishment. By the way, I really like the Admiral and Mrs. Croft. I think they're really like couple goals, because she was ready and willing to follow her husband to be in the same ship, even during the time of war. So they always like to be together. And now they're just having fun, like looking over the new home and having morning walks. And he's like, yeah, I'm just a third wheel. I don't want to hang out with you guys in the morning. So, yeah, I like them. Hitherto, there had been but one opinion of Captain Wentworth among the Musgroves and their dependencies. It was unvarying, warm admiration everywhere. But this intimate footing was not more than established when a certain Charles Hayter returned among them, to be a good deal disturbed by it, and to think Captain Wentworth very much in the way. Hello, Time Lord, how are you? Charles Hayter was the eldest of all the cousins, and a very amiable, pleasing young man, between whom and Henrietta there had been a considerable appearance of attachment previous to Captain Wentworth's introduction. He was in orders, and having a curacy in the neighbourhood, where residence was not required, lived at his father's house, only 2 miles from Uppercross. A short distance from home, had left his fair one unguarded by his attentions at this critical period, and when he came back he had the pain of finding very altered manners, and of seeing Captain Wentworth. Mrs. Musgrove and Mrs. Hayter were sisters. They had each had money, but their marriages had made a material difference in their degree of consequence. Mr. Hayter had some property of his own, but it was insignificant compared to Mr. Musgrove's, and while the Musgroves were in the first way of society in the country, the young Hayters would, from their parents' inferior, retired, and unpolished way of living, and their own defective education, have been hardly in any class at all, but for the connection with Uppercross. This eldest son, of course, excepted, who had chosen to be a scholar and a gentleman, and who was very superior in cultivation and manners to all the rest. What a lovely way to say that this young man's family was utter trash. But yeah, so Charles Hayter is a new character that we are just being introduced to. There was something going on between him and Henrietta, one of the Musgrove girls. But now that he comes back after some absence, and he's like, I don't think I'm enjoying these changes that have taken place while I was away. I wonder what's gonna happen, you guys. All right, continuing on. The 2 families had always been on excellent terms, there being no pride on one side and no envy on the other, and only such a consciousness of superiority in the Miss Musgroves as made them pleased to improve their cousins. Charles's attention to Henrietta had been observed by her father and mother without any disapprobation. It would not be a great match for her, but if Henrietta liked him, and Henrietta did seem to like him. Henrietta fully thought so herself before Captain Wentworth came, but from that time cousin Charles had been very much forgotten. Which of the two sisters was preferred by Captain Wentworth was as yet quite doubtful, as far as Anne's observation reached. Henrietta was perhaps the prettiest. Louisa had the highest spirits, and she knew not now whether the more gentle or the more lively character were most likely to attract him. Mr. and Mrs. Musgrove, either from seeing little or from an entire confidence in the discretion of both their daughters, and of all the young men who came near them, seemed to leave everything to take its chance. There was not the smallest appearance of solicitude or remark about them in the mansion house, but it was different at the cottage. The young couple, that is, Mary and Charles Musgrove, the young couple there were more disposed to speculate and wonder, and Captain Wentworth had not been above 4 or 5 times in the Miss Musgrove's company, and Charles Hayter had but just reappeared, when Anne had to listen to the opinions of her brother and sister as to which was the one liked best. Charles gave it for Louisa, Mary for Henrietta, but quite agreeing that to have him marry either would be extremely delightful. Charles, quote, had never seen a pleasanter man in his life, and from what he had once heard Captain Wentworth himself say, was very sure that he had not made less than 20,000 pounds by the war. Here was a fortune at once, besides which there would be a chance of what might be done in any future war. He was sure Captain Wentworth was as likely a man to distinguish himself as any officer in the navy. Oh, it would be capital match for either of his sisters. Upon my word it would, replied Mary. Dear me, if he should rise to any very great honours, if he should ever be made a baronet. Lady Wentworth sounds very well. That would be a noble thing indeed for Henrietta. She would take place of me then, and Henrietta would not dislike that. Sir Frederick and Lady Wentworth. Oh, it would be but a new creation, however, and I never think much of your new creations. It suited Mary best to think Henrietta the one preferred on the very account of Charles Hayter, whose pretensions she wished to see put an end to. She looked down very decidedly on the Hayters, and thought it would be quite a misfortune to have the existing connection between the families renewed. Very sad for herself and her children. You know, said she, I cannot think him at all a fit match for Henrietta, and considering the alliances which the Musgroves have made, she has no right to throw herself away. I do not think any young woman has the right to make a choice that may be disagreeable and inconvenient to the principal part of her family, and be giving bad connections to those who have not been used to them. And pray, who is Charles Hayter? Nothing but a country curate, a most improper match for Miss Musgrove of Uppercross. Her husband, however, would not agree with her here, for besides having a regard for his cousin, Charles Hayter was an eldest son, and he saw things as an eldest son himself. Now you're talking nonsense, Mary, was therefore his answer. It would not be a great match for Henrietta, but Charles has a very fair chance, through the Spicers, of getting something from the bishop in the course of a year or two, and you will please to remember that he is the eldest son. Whenever my uncle dies, he steps into a very pretty property. The estate at Winthrop is not less than 250 acres, besides the farm near Taunton, which is some of the best land in the country. I grant you that any of them but Charles would be a very shocking match for Henrietta, and indeed it could not be. He is the only one that could be possible, but he is a very good-natured, good sort of fellow, and whenever Winthrop comes into his hands, he will make a different sort of place of it, and live in a very different sort of way, and with that property, he will never be a contemptible man. good freehold property. No, no, Henrietta might do worse than marry Charles Hayter. And if she has him, and Louisa can get Captain Wentworth, I shall be very well satisfied. Charles may say what he pleases, cried Mary to Anne as soon as he was out of the room. But it would be shocking to have Henrietta marry Charles Hayter. A very bad thing for her, and still worse for me. And therefore, it is very much to be wished that Captain Wentworth may soon put him quite out of her head. And I have very little doubt that he has. She took hardly any notice of Charles Hayter yesterday. I wish you had been there to see her behavior. And as to Captain Wentworth, liking Louisa as well as Henrietta, it is nonsense to say so, for he certainly does like Henrietta a great deal the best, but Charles is so positive. I wish you had been with us there yesterday, for then you might have decided between us, and I am sure you would have thought as I did, unless you had been determined to give it against me. Dishing out all the gossip, yes, Red Tempest. Here's a little bit more. A dinner at Mr. Musgrove's had been the occasion when all of these things should have been seen by Anne, but she had stayed home, under the mixed plea of a headache of her own and some return of indisposition in little Charles. That is the boy who fell off the tree. She's still looking after him. She had thought only of avoiding Captain I just realized there's so many Charleses in this book. Dang it! Little Charles, the boy who fell off the tree and dislocated his clavicle. Then, or collarbone. Then there's Charles Musgrove, who is Mary's husband, who is to inherit Uppercross. And then there's Charles Hayter, who is the cousin whom they've been all talking about, who's now the jealous cousin. So yeah, I hope you guys don't get all the Charles mixed up, okay? All right. Yeah, so Anne was supposed to have seen a scene where they all kind of had something happen. So we'll see. This is the scene. She had thought only of avoiding Captain Wentworth, but an escape from being appealed to as umpire was now added to the advantages of a quiet evening. As to Captain Wentworth's views, she deemed it of more consequence that he should know his own mind early enough not to be endangering the happiness of either sister, or impeaching his own honor, than that he should prefer Henrietta to Louisa, or Louisa to Henrietta. Either of them would, in all probability, make him an affectionate, good-humoured wife. With regards to Charles Hayter, she had delicacy which must be pained by any lightness of conduct in a well-meaning young woman, and a heart to sympathize in any of the sufferings it occasioned. But if Henrietta found herself mistaken in the nature of her feelings, the alteration could not be understood too soon. Charles Hayter had met with much to disquiet and mortify him in his cousin's behavior, that is, in Henrietta's. She had too old a regard for him to be now so wholly estranged as might in 2 meetings extinguish every past hope, and leave him nothing to do but to keep away from Uppercross. But there was such a change as became very alarming, when such a man as Captain Wentworth was to be regarded as the probable cause. He had been absent only 2 Sundays, and when they parted had left her interested, even to the height of his wishes, in his prospect of soon quitting his present curacy, and obtaining that of Uppercross instead. It had then seemed the object nearest her heart, the Dr. Shirley, the rector, who for more than 40 years had been zealously discharging all the duties of his office, though was now growing too infirm for many of them, should be quite fixed on engaging a curate, should make his curacy quite as good as he could afford, and should give Charles Hayter the promise of it. The advantage of his having come only to Uppercross, instead of going 6 miles another way, of his having, in every respect, a better curacy of his belonging to their dear Dr. Shirley, and of dear, good Dr. Shirling's being relieved from the duty which he could no longer get through without most injurious fatigue, had been a great deal, even to Louisa, but had been almost everything to Henrietta. When he came back, alas, the zeal of the business was gone by. Louisa could not listen at all to his account of a conversation which he had just held with Dr. Shirley. She was at a window, looking out for Captain Wentworth, and even Henrietta had at best only a divided attention to give, and seemed to have forgotten all the former doubt and solicitude of the negotiation. "Well, I am very glad indeed, but I always thought you would have it. I always thought you sure. It did not appear to me that, in short, you know, Dr. Shirley must have a curate, and you had secured his promise. Is he coming, Louisa?" One morning, very soon after the dinner at the Musgroves, at which Anne had not been present, Captain Wentworth walked into the drawing-room at the cottage, where were only herself and the little invalid Charles, who was lying on the sofa. Ooh, so now they're forced to be alone in the same room. The surprise of finding himself almost alone with Anne Elliot deprived his manners of their usual composure. He started and could only say, "I thought the Miss Musgroves had been here. Mrs. Musgrove told me I should find them here," before he walked to the window to recollect himself and feel how he ought to behave. "They are upstairs with my sister. They will be down in a few moments, I dare say," had been Anne's reply, in all the confusion that was natural. And if the child had not called her to come and do something for him, she would have been out of the room the next moment, and released Captain Wentworth as well as herself. He continued at the window, and after calmly and politely saying, "I hope the little boy is better," was silent. She was obliged to kneel down by the sofa and remain there to satisfy her patient, and thus they continued a few minutes, when, to her very great satisfaction, she heard some other person crossing the little vestibule. She hoped, on turning her head, to see the master of the house, but it proved to be one much less calculated for making matters easy. Charles Hayter, probably not at all better pleased by the sight of Captain Wentworth than Captain Wentworth had been by the sight of Anne. She only attempted to say, "How do you do? Will you not sit down? The others will be here presently." Captain Wentworth, however, came from his window, apparently not ill-disposed for conversation. But Charles Hayter soon put an end to his attempts by seating himself near the table and taking up the newspaper, and Captain Wentworth returned to his window. Oh, I didn't like how he read that, but okay. But Charles Hayter soon put an end to his attempts by seating himself near the table and taking up the newspaper, and Captain Wentworth returned to his window. He has been snubbed. Snubbed. And yes, Red Tempest says, "How scandalous to be alone with a woman." I know, but right now they're no longer alone. There's now Charles Hayter, who is definitely going to be useless in proving to be useless in improving the mood and atmosphere of the place. Gosh darn it, we need somebody else to come and improve matters here. Another minute brought another addition. Hooray! Oh no, the younger boy, a remarkable, stout, forward child of 2 years old, having got the door opened for him by someone without, made his determined appearance among them, and went straight to the sofa to see what was going on, and put his claim to anything good that might be giving away. There being nothing to eat, he could only have some play, and as his aunt would not let him tease his sick brother, he began to fasten himself upon her as she knelt, in such a way that, busy as she was about Charles, she could not shake him off. She spoke to him, ordered, entreated, and insisted in vain. Once she did contrive to push him away, the boy had the greater pleasure in getting upon her back again directly. "Walter," said she, "get down this moment. You are extremely troublesome. I am very angry with you." "Walter," cried Charles Hayter, "why do you not do as you're bid? Do not you hear your aunt speak? Come to me, Walter. Come to cousin Charles." But not a bit did Walter stir. In another moment, however, she found herself in the state of being released from him. Someone was taking him from her, though he had bent down her head so much that his little sturdy hands were unfastened from around her neck, and he was resolutely borne away before she knew that Captain Wentworth had done it. Her sensations on the discovery made her perfectly speechless. She could not even thank him. She could only hang over little Charles with most disordered feelings. His kindness in stepping forward to her relief, the manner, the silence in which it had passed, the little particulars of the circumstance, with the conviction soon forced on her by the noise he was studiously making with the child, that he meant to avoid hearing her thanks, and rather sought to testify that her conversation was the last of his wants, produced such a confusion of varying but very painful agitation as she could not recover from, till enabled by the entrance of Mary and Miss Musgroves to make over her little patient to their cares, and leave the room. She could not stay. It might have been an opportunity of watching the loves and jealousies of the four. They were now all together, but she could stay for none of it. It was evident that Charles Hayter was not well inclined towards Captain Wentworth. She got a strong impression of his having said in a vexed tone of voice after Captain Wentworth's interference, "You ought to have minded me, Walter, when I told you to not tease your aunt," and could comprehend his regretting that Captain Wentworth should do what he ought to have done himself. But neither Charles Hayter's feelings nor anybody's feelings could interest her till she had a little better arranged her own. She was ashamed of herself, quite ashamed of being so nervous, so overcome by such a trifle. But so it was, and it required a long application of solitude and reflection to recover her. So we see. Do you guys like Charles Hayter? Because I don't. He may be a very good man, but I don't like him. I mean, he saw that the kid was being annoying. First of all, the pettiness. Okay, I get it if he's kind of like put off by the fact that the girl no longer like excited about him. Fine, whatever. But then like to be all petty about it and take it up with somebody who actually was Wentworth's only like crime was just to be there. Whereas if Henrietta and Louisa are going to go crazy over him, that's not his problem. That's Henrietta's problem. That's Charles Hayter's problem because he did not manage to win her over or whatever. I don't know. I just think that it's really stupid that he's like, oh, well, I don't like you for having stolen my girl, so I'm just going to like ignore you. I'm not even going to be civil or like... he was downright rude when he was there. And that's one, but the one that cemented my dislike of him, which I'm like, I hope you lose the girl. The one that cemented my dislike of him, yes, I'm petty. I'm accusing him of being petty, and I'm petting myself. I don't care. Was like, oh my gosh, you see that this kid is being an annoying little thing, and I mean, the kid is 3 years old. It's you what prevented you from going there and doing what Wentworth did? Oh, come on, you're like, come on, kid, stop doing that. Like, honestly. And then he was like upset that Captain Wentworth did the thing that he should have done. Poor Anne, you guys, like literally she was like being like, she was kneeling on the floor next to the couch with the fat kid on top of her. She was like nearly bent double, like almost like, imagine that. It was a very disgraceful way of being seen. So yeah, the things that she has to go through, like honestly, I don't think they pay her enough for this. Oh wait, they're not paying her at all to be a nursemaid. Oh my goodness. And stand up for yourself. Yeah, Red Tempest, I know there's too many Charles. I'm confused. You're confused already. It's okay. I'll try to keep everything straight for you. But in time, you will hopefully get used to it. I hope. Walter wants attention from his aunt. I know, they all love Walter. I mean, they all love Anne. So this is Charles and Mary's second baby. And of course, they seem to like her and respect her more than they like and respect their mom. But even so, this kid is being, 2 years old. There's toddlers are, they reach that age when they're just insufferable. From what I hear, I don't know. I haven't been around many kids myself, but yeah, just because, especially if they like you, they're going to be a little bit rough and rowdy, So yeah, he wants attention from his aunt, whom he likes, of course. Little butterfly says, "See, hater, why are you being a hater?" Good one, little butterfly. It just dawned on me. Yes, that is so good, hater. And that is how his name is pronounced, because I watched the adaptations and that's how they say his name. His name is literally Charles Hayter. Oh, I love it. Now that I think about it, I wonder if this was like Jane Austen chose a name suitable for the dude. Now I think it's purposeful. They are not paying Anne. They're not paying Anne. Anne is Mary's sister, so she's just there to live with her before she goes back to living with her parents in Bath. So she's going to be in her sister's house, her married sister's house, for the autumn. Then she's going to go to Lady Russell's to spend some winter. And then for the new year, they're going to move to Bath for the rest of the winter. So Anne right now, she's just living with friends and family. Because remember, her house, Kellynch Hall, has been rented out to Captain Frederick's sister and husband. So, Anne may want to assert her rights, but in a way, we have a word for it in Spanish, siendo una arrimada, being one that's just living there without paying rent or bills or whatever. She doesn't, of course, have many say in things. So she's trying to be useful. And I get it. When you're living in somebody else's place, you try to be useful, and especially if you're living rent-free there. But this was, of course, something that people did all the time back in the day. And I'm sure now people still do it, but now we want them to contribute with the rent, of course. So yeah. Hi, Noodle Something's Kimchi. Happy you're here, even though you're late. We only read one chapter so far. I don't know if we're going to read another one. Let me just check the length of this one and compare it to that one. So this one's 11 pages. I may have to... You know what? I'm going to read another one. So I'm just going to stop dilly-dallying here and say thank you and welcome to everybody who's here. Keep sharing your thoughts in the chat. I will read them out loud. But let's continue on with the next chapter. Oh, Time Lord Boy says, can't imagine it's nice being a nursemaid. I mean, a job is a job, but at this point, Anne is just volunteering for the job. So, unfortunately, she's not getting paid for it. All right, let's continue on. Oh, and remember, Mary has a maid called Jemima, right? She's like a nursery maid. She's supposed to take care of the kids. Mary swears by Jemima, thinks that she's the best. And the mother-in-law, Mrs. Musgrove, had, early on in the book, she criticized the fact that her nursery maid, the one that's supposed to take care of the kids, she just is gallivanting about, and she's not good for the job. And apparently that's true, because who knows where's Jemima during this time? Why is she not taking care of the kids? Why does she allow the kid Walter to oppress Anne? All right, continuing on. Chapter 10. Other opportunities of making her observations could not fail to occur. Anne had soon been in company with all the four together, often enough to have an opinion, though too wise to acknowledge as much at home, where she knew would have satisfied neither husband nor wife. For, while she considered Louisa to be rather the favourite, she could not but think, as far as she might dare to judge from memory and experience, that Captain Wentworth was not in love with either. They were more in love with him, yet there was not love. It was a little fever of admiration, but it might, probably must, end in love with some. Charles Hayter seemed aware of being slighted, and yet Henrietta had sometimes the air of being divided between them. Anne longed for the power of representing to them all what they were about, and of pointing out some of the evils they were exposing themselves to. She did not attribute guile to any. It was the highest satisfaction to her to believe Captain Wentworth not in the least aware of the pain he was occasioning. There was no triumph, no pitiful triumph in his manner. He had probably never heard and never thought of any claims of Charles Hayter. He was only wrong in accepting the attentions, for accepting must be the word, of two young women at once. After a short struggle, however, Charles Hayter seemed to quit the field. 3 days had passed without his coming once to Uppercross, a most decided change. He had even refused one regular invitation to dinner, and having been found on the occasion by Mr. Musgrove, with some large books before him, and Mr. and Mrs. Musgrove were sure all could not be right, and talked with grave faces of his studying himself to death. It was Mary's hope and belief that he had received a positive dismissal from Henrietta, and her husband lived under the constant dependence of seeing him tomorrow. Anne could only feel that Charles Hayter was wise. One morning, about this time, Charles Musgrove and Captain Wentworth, being gone shooting together, as the sisters were in the cottage, were sitting quietly at work. They were visited at the window by the sisters from the mansion house. It was a very fine November day, and the Miss Musgroves came through the little ground and stopped for no other purpose than to say they were going to take a long walk, and therefore concluded Mary could not like to go with them. And when Mary immediately replied, with some jealousy at not being supposed a good walker, "Oh yes, I should like to join you very much. I am very fond of a long walk," Anne felt persuaded. By the looks of the two girls, there was precisely what they did not wish, and admired them again the sort of necessity which the family habit seemed to produce, of everything being to the communicated, and everything being to be done together, however undesired and inconvenient. She tried to dissuade Mary from going, but in vain, and that being the case, thought it best to accept the Miss Musgroves' much more cordial invitation to herself to go likewise, as she might be useful in turning back with her sister, and lessening the interference in any plan of their own. "I cannot imagine why they should suppose I should not like a long walk," said Mary as she went upstairs. "Everybody is always supposing that I am not a good walker, and yet they would not have been pleased if we had refused to join them." Oh, Mary, oh, Mary. When people come in this manner on purpose to ask us, how can one say no? Just as they were setting off, the gentlemen returned. They had taken out a young dog, who had spoiled their sport, and sent them back early. Their time and strength and spirits were, therefore, exactly ready for this walk, and they entered into it with pleasure. Could Anne have foreseen such a junction, she would have stayed at home. But, from some feelings of interest and curiosity, she fancied now that it was too late to retract, and the whole 6 set forward together in the direction chosen by the Miss Musgroves, who evidently considered the walk as under the guidance. Anne's object was not to be in the way of anybody, and where the narrow paths across the fields made separations necessary, to keep with her brother and sister. Her pleasure in the walk must arise from the exercise and the day, from the view of the last smiles of the year upon the tawny leaves and withered hedges, and from repeating to herself some few of the 1,000 poetical descriptions extant of autumn, that season of peculiar and inexhaustible influence on the mind of taste and tenderness, that season which has drawn from every poet worthy of being read some attempt at description, or some lines of feeling. She occupied her mind as much as possible in such like musings and quotations, but it was not possible that when within reach of Captain Wentworth's conversation with either of the Miss Musgroves, she should not try to hear it. Yet she caught little very remarkable. It was mere lively chat, such as any young persons on an intimate footing might fall into. He was more engaged with Louisa than with Henrietta. Louisa certainly put more forward for his notice than her sister. This distinction appeared to increase, and there was one speech of Louisa's which struck her. After one of the many praises of the day which were continually bursting forth, Captain Wentworth added, "What a glorious weather for the Admiral and my sister! They meant to take a long drive this morning. Perhaps we may hail them from some of these hills. They talked of coming into this side of the country. I wonder whereabouts they will upset today. Oh, it does happen very often, I assure you, but my sister makes nothing of it. She would as lief be tossed out as not." So they're in the little curricle, they have a little carriage. It's just for pleasure. You go out and about with your little horse and your little carriage. It's just for two people. But apparently they they have ended up in some ditch, like they've been knocked over and they spill on over into the ground. So they've had a little accident or two. So he's like, I wonder where they're going to overturn themselves. But his sister's like, that's fine. It's just a little spill. She's not a delicate lady. I do like his sister, probably because she seems to be a gallant sort of lady, and yeah. So anyway, she's a fun one. Anyway, I forgot about this, that they have overturned their little carriage. You make the most of it, I know," cried Louisa. "But if it were really so, I should do just the same in her place. If I loved a man as she loves the Admiral, I should always be with him. Nothing should ever separate us, and I would rather be overturned by him than driven safely by anybody else." It was spoken with enthusiasm. "Had you?" cried he, catching the same tone. "I honor you." And there was silence between them for a little while. Anne could not immediately fall into a quotation again. The sweet scenes of autumn were for a while put by, unless some tender sonnet, fraught with the apt analogy of the declining year, with the declining happiness, and the images of youth and hope, and spring all gone together, blessed her memory. Oh, poor Anne. She was trying to like remember poetry lines about autumn and the beauty, but now it's like autumn is when everything dies. Autumn is when spring is gone. Autumn is the time of depression. Oh gosh. I don't even know. Are we still keeping a poor Anne counter? Because this deserves it. She roused herself to say, as they struck by order into another path, Is not this one of the ways to Winthrop?" But nobody heard, or at least nobody answered her. Winthrop, however, were its environs, for young men are sometimes to be met with strolling about near home, was their destination, and another half-mile of gradual ascent through large enclosures, with the ploughs at work and the fresh-made path, spoke the farmer counteracting the sweets of poetical despondence, and meaning to have spring again, they gained the summit of the most considerable hill, which parted Uppercross and Winthrop, and soon commanded a full view of the latter, at the foot of the hill, on the other side. Winthrop, without beauty and without dignity, was stretched before them, an indifferent house, standing low and hemmed in by the barns and buildings of a farmyard. Mary exclaimed, "Bless me! Here's Winthrop! I declare I had no idea. Well, now I think I'd better turn back. I am excessively tired." Henrietta, conscious and ashamed, and seeing no cousin Charles walking along any path or leaning against any gate, was ready to do as Mary wished. But no, said Charles no, sorry, I'm trying to do things. So Henrietta's like, oh, I also want to leave. No, said Charles Musgrove, and no, cried Louisa more eagerly, and taking her. I wonder why, Louisa, you want your sister to hook up, not to marry Charles. I guess just to liberate the field for you. How selfless of you. And taking her sister aside, seemed to be arguing the matter warmly. Charles, in the meanwhile, that is Charles, Mary's husband, Charles, in the meanwhile, was very decidedly declaring his resolution of calling on his aunt now that he was so near, and very evidently, though more fearfully, trying to induce his wife to go too. But this was one of the points on which the lady showed her strength, and when he recommended the advantage of resting herself a quarter of an hour at Winthrop, as she felt so tired, she resolutely answered, "Oh no, indeed, walking up that hill again would do her more harm than any sitting down could do her good." And, in short, her look and manner declared that she would not. After a little succession of these sort of debates and consultations, it was settled between Charles and his two sisters that he and Henrietta would just run down a few minutes to see their aunt and cousins, while the rest of the party waited for them at the top of the hill. Louisa seemed the principal arranger of the plan, and, as she went a little way with them down the hill, still talking to Henrietta, Mary took the opportunity of looking scornfully around her, and saying to Captain Wentworth, "It is very unpleasant having such connections, but I assure you I have never been in the house above twice in my life." She received no other answer than an artificial, assenting smile, followed by a contemptuous glance as he turned away, which Anne perfectly knew the meaning of. The brow of the hill where they remained was a cheerful spot. Louisa returned, and Mary, finding a comfortable seat for herself on the step of a stile, was very well satisfied so long as the others all stood about her. But when Louisa drew Captain Wentworth away to try for a gleaning of nuts in an adjoining hedgerow, and they were gone by degrees quite out of sight and sound, Mary was happy no longer. She quarrelled with her own seat, was sure Louisa had got a much better somewhere, and nothing could prevent her from going to look for a better also. She turned through the same gate, but could not see them. Anne found a nice seat for her on a dry sunny bank under the hedgerow, in which she had no doubt of their still being in some spot or other. Mary sat down for a moment, but it would not do. She was sure Louisa had found a better seat somewhere else, and she would go on till she overtook her. Anne, really tired herself, was glad to sit down, and she very soon heard Captain Wentworth and Louisa in the hedgerow behind her, as if making their way back along the rough, wild sort of channel down the centre. They were speaking as they drew near. Louisa's voice was the first distinguished. She seemed to be in the middle of some eager speech. What Anne first heard was, "And so I made her go. I could not bear that she should be frightened from the visit by such nonsense. What? Would I be turned back from doing a thing that I had determined to do, and that I knew to be right by the airs and interference of such a person, or of any person I may say? No. I have no idea of being so easily persuaded. When I have made up my mind, I have made it, and Henrietta seemed entirely to have made up hers to call at Winthrop to-day, and yet she was near giving it up, out of nonsensical complacence. She would have turned back then, but for you? She would indeed. I am almost ashamed to say it." "Happy for her, to have such a mind as yours at hand. After the hints you gave just now, which did but confirm my own observations, the last time I was in company with him, I need not affect to have no comprehension of what is going on. I see that more than a mere dutiful morning visit to your aunt was in question, and woe betide him, and her too, when it comes to things of consequence. When they are placed in circumstances requiring fortitude and strength of mind, if she have not resolution enough to resist idle interference in such trifles as this. Your sister is an amiable creature, but yours is the character of decision and firmness I see. If you value her conduct or happiness, infuse as much of your own spirit into her as you can. But this, no doubt, you have been always doing. It is the worst evil of too yielding and indecisive a character, that no influence over it can be depended on. You're never sure of a good impression being durable. Everybody may sway it. Let those who would be happy be firm. Here's a nut, said he, catching one down from an upper bough. To exemplify, a beautiful glossy nut, which, blessed with original strength, has outlived all the storms of autumn. Not a puncture, not a weak spot anywhere. This nut, he's making a speech out of a nut. This nut, he continued, with playful solemnity, while so many of its brethren have fallen and had been trodden underfoot, is still in possession of all the happiness that a hazelnut can be supposed capable of. Then returning to his former earnest tone, my first wish for all whom I am interested in is that they should be firm. If Louisa Musgrove would be beautiful and happy in her November of life, she will cherish all her present powers of mind. He had done, and was unanswered. It would have surprised Anne if Louisa could have readily answered such a speech. Words of such interest, spoken with such serious warmth. She could imagine what Louisa was feeling. For herself, she feared to move, lest she should be seen. While she remained, a bush of low rambling holly protected her, and they were moving on. Before they were beyond her hearing, however, Louisa spoke again. Mary is good-natured enough in many respects, but she does sometimes provoke me excessively by her nonsense and pride. The Elliot pride. She has a great deal too much of the Elliot pride. We do so wish that Charles had married Anne instead. I suppose you know he wished to marry Anne. After a moment's pause, Captain Wentworth said, Do you mean that she refused him? Oh, yes, certainly. When did that happen? I do not exactly know, for Henrietta and I were still at school at that time, but I believe a year before he married Mary. Oh, man! Wow, Charles, you certainly moved on quite quickly, huh? I wish she had accepted him. We should all have liked her a great deal better, and Papa and Mamma always think it was her great friend Lady Russell's doing that she did not. They think Charles might not be learned and bookish enough to please Lady Russell, and that therefore she persuaded Anne to refuse him. The sounds were retreating, and Anne distinguished no more. Her own emotions still kept her fixed. She had much to recover from before she could move. The listener's proverbial fate was not absolutely hers. She had heard no evil of herself, but she had heard a great deal of very painful import. She saw how her own character was considered by Captain Wentworth, and there had been just that degree of feeling and curiosity about her in his manner which must give her extreme agitation. As soon as she could, she went after Mary, and having found and walked back with her to their former station, by the stile, she felt some comfort in their whole party being immediately afterwards collected, and once more in motion together. Her spirits wanted the solitude and silence which only numbers could give. Charles and Henrietta returned, bringing, as may be conjectured, Charles Hayter with them. The minutiae of the business Anne could not attempt to understand. Even Captain Wentworth did not seem admitted to perfect confidence here, but that there had been a withdrawing on the gentleman's side, and a relenting on the ladies', and that they were now very glad to be together again, did not admit a doubt. Henrietta looked a little ashamed, but very well pleased, and Charles Hayter exceedingly happy, and they were devoted to each other almost from the first instant of their all settling forward for Uppercross. Everything now marked out Louisa for Captain Wentworth. Nothing could be plainer, and where many divisions were necessary, or even where they were not, they walked side by side nearly as much as the other two. In a long strip of meadowland, where there were ample space for all, they were thus divided, forming three distinct parties, and to that party of the three which boasted the least animation, the least complaisance, Anne necessarily belonged. She joined Charles and Mary, and was tired enough to be glad of Charles's other arm. But Charles, though in a very good humour with her, was out of temper with his wife. Mary had shown herself disobliging to him, and was now to reap the consequence, which consequence was dropping her arm almost every moment to cut off the head of some nettles in the hedge with his switch. And when Mary began to complain of it, and lament her being ill-used, according to custom, in being on the hedge side, while Anne was never incommoded on the other, he dropped the arms of both to hunt after a weasel which he had a momentary glance of, and they could hardly get him along at all. This long meadow bordered a lane, which the footpath at the end of it was to cross, and when the party had all reached the gate of the exit, the carriage advancing in the same direction, which had been some time heard, was just coming up, and proved to be Admiral Croft's gig. He and his wife had taken their intended drive and were returning home. Upon hearing how long a walk the young people had engaged in, they kindly offered a seat to any lady who might be particularly tired. It would save her a full mile, and they were going through Uppercross. The invitation was general, and generally declined. The Miss Musgroves were not at all tired, and Mary was either offended by not being asked before any of the others, or what Louisa called the Elliot pride could not endure to make a third in a one-horse chaise. The walking party had crossed the lane, and were surmounting an opposite stile, and the Admiral was putting his horse into motion again, when Captain Wentworth cleared the hedge in a moment to say something to his sister. The something might be guessed by its effects. "Miss Elliot, I am sure you are tired," cried Mrs. Croft. "Do let us have the pleasure of taking you home. Here is an excellent room for 3, I assure you. If we were all like you, I believe we might sit 4. You must indeed, you must." Anne was still in the lane, and though instinctively beginning to decline, she was not allowed to proceed. The Admiral's kind urgency came in support of his wife. They would not be refused. They compressed themselves into the smallest possible space to leave her a corner, and Captain Wentworth, without saying a word, turned to her, and quietly obliged her to be assisted into the carriage. Yes, he had done it. She was in the carriage, and felt that he had placed her there, that his will in his hands had done it, that she owed it to his perception of her fatigue, and his resolution to give her rest. She was very much affected by the view of his disposition toward her, which all these things made apparent. This little circumstance seemed the completion of all that had gone before. She understood him. He could not forgive her, but he could not be unfeeling. Though condemning her for the past, and considering it high and unjust resentment, though perfectly careless of her, and though becoming attached to another, still he could not see her suffer without the desire of giving her relief. It was a remainder of a former sentiment. It was an impulse of pure though unacknowledged friendship. It was a proof of his own warm and amiable heart, which she could not contemplate without emotions so compounded of pleasure and pain that she knew not which prevailed. Her answers to the kindness and the remarks of her companions were first unconsciously given. They had travelled half the way along the rough lane before she was quite awake to what they said. She then found them talking of Frederick. "He certainly means to have one or two. Not one or two. No, not one or two of the girls. One of the 2 girls. He certainly means to have one or other of those 2 girls, Sophie," said the Admiral. "But there is no saying which. He has been running after them too, long enough, one would think, to make up his mind. Ah, this comes of the peace. If it were war now, he would have settled it long ago. We sailors, Miss Elliot, cannot afford to make courtships in time of war. How many days was it, my dear, when the first time of my seeing you and our sitting down together in our lodgings at North Yarmouth?" "We had better not talk about it, my dear," replied Mrs. Croft pleasantly, "for if Miss Elliot were to hear how soon we came to an understanding, she would never be persuaded that we could be happy together. I had known you by character, however, long before." "Well, and I had heard of you as a very pretty girl, and what were we to wait for besides? I do not like such things so long in hand. I wish Frederick would spread a little more canvas and bring us home one of these young ladies to Kellynch. Then there would always be company for them. And very nice young ladies they both are. I hardly know one from the other. Very good-humoured, unaffected girls indeed, said Mrs. Croft, in a tone of calmer praise, such as made Anne suspect that her keener powers might not consider either of them as quite worthy of her brother. And a very respectable family. One could not be connected with better people. My dear Admiral, that post! We shall certainly take that post! But, by coolly giving the reins a better direction herself, they happily passed the danger, and by once afterwards judiciously putting out her hand, they neither fell into a rut nor ran afoul of a dung cart. And Anne, with some amusement at their style of driving, which she imagined no bad representation of the general guidance of their affairs, found herself safely deposited by them at the cottage. End of chapter. I love those two. Like, I think they're really cute together. We do get a hint as to like the fact that they kind of like they were very quick to like meet and get married. Which is kind of what happened to Anne too. Anne and Frederick Wentworth, when they met, and they were pretty soon, like after they kind of like confessed their feelings to each other or whatever, they were engaged pretty quickly. And again, it's because he was a sailor, so he was like, cool, let's get this done, let's get married. So again, it's not just because of his temperament, which he's like very like, cool, let's do this, but it's also because of the profession. As a sailor's wife or as a sailor, you have a limited amount of time in land, so you better make the most of it. So during that time, he's just going, like, I'm imagining Admiral Croft during that time, he's like, cute girl, have heard good stuff about her, I want to get married to her. So anyway, it's good to see at least there's one happy couple in this whole story. Yeah, so what do you guys think so far as to what happened? What do you guys think, or what do you guys make of Wentworth's actions? Like, I know we got Anne's kind of like how she views things, but what do you think she's right that he's like, what do you guys think he's going through his mind? Like, as a guy, if there's guys listening to this, what would you have done? Or what are your thoughts? I'm not here to judge or whatever. I just want to know, like, as a guy, like, sometimes you guys, I ask my dad or like friends or whatnot, like, what would you have done in this situation? And I get totally different views of what I would have thought. Again, it's a guy's perspective. Anyway, so if you have any perspective on Wentworth, do share it. Anyway, it's still pretty interesting to see how, it's a story where nothing really is going on. Like, the thing that gives the conflict and stuff like that is basically Anne and Wentworth's little dance of like, how are we gonna like continue to like pretend that we're nothing to each other when at one point in our lives we were everything to each other. All right, so Red Tempest says poor Anne too. Okay, so far two of them. Yeah, so Mary wants to have the best seat no matter what. Yes, she does, because she is the daughter of a baronet, so she believes that she outranks everybody, and she does in fact outrank everybody, even the lady of Uppercross, the mother of the Musgrove girls. But it's just seen as like, it's in poor taste to always be wanting the best, or to be first, or to be the most important. It really is. Like, you could do without a little bit of that Elliot pride. Oh, Teal says almost need a persuaded counter too, right? I think if we can only do a poor Anne counter, if we can keep track of that, then we can do other counters. Everyone prefers Anne. Yes, it's Red Tempest. Everybody does prefer Anne, but when you compare Anne to the rest of her family, we have Mary, who is just full of nonsense. We have Elizabeth, who is just absolutely cold and vain and selfish. Everybody would definitely Anne just outshines everybody. Just she's the nicest, most decent of the Elliots, honestly. Let's see. Yes, Red Tempest says they should fire the nursemaid. Yes, they should. Jemima's not a good nursemaid. Let's see. And Red Tempest says, was Charles treating Anne better than Mary? Yes, he was treating Anne better than Mary. He has more consideration for her because she was not being troublesome, whereas he's angry at Mary. So because Mary started to complain, he's like, okay, forget it. I'm just going to go away and hunt after a weasel. I love the addition of it being a weasel. So there he goes. He just like, okay, you guys can walk yourselves. I'm not going to give you guys my arm. He just got fed up. I don't really blame him though. Unfortunately for Anne, but I don't blame him because Mary just can be very annoying. Let's see. What else? Time Lord Boy says, I always go weasel hunting when I'm out in the country. Ooh, weasel hunting. What do you do? Like, do you do pelts? Do you like, what do you do with the weasels? I'm sure you don't like, is it for the pelts or whatnot? What kind of weasel is it? Little butterfly. And also, are there a lot of weasels and what time of year? Or is it just year round? It'd be interesting to know. I am not a hunter or do any shooting, so I'm a mere city girl, city bird. So do let me know about hunting. Little Butterfly says Charles was giving Mary the cold shoulder. Yes, but thankfully Anne was able to get a ride from the Crofts, and it was really funny because they keep overturning their little curricle. So yes, she survived it. Red Tempest also says Wentworth wants to know what Anne was doing after she dumped him. Ooh, yeah, okay, yes, exactly. He wants to know what she was doing. He wants to know if she had any other chances, if she turned them down. What kind of other people did she turn down, or what happened? Because nobody's going to talk about Mary, because Mary's a nobody. Nobody cares about Mary, about Anne. Nobody cares about Anne now. She's an old maid. She's a withered hag, according to society. So, of course, just as she is curious about him, he is going to be curious about her, at least I believe, especially if his grudge is so much that after 8 years, he still is being petty. Little Butterfly says, so he doesn't pay attention when he is driving. I believe not. Remember, this is comparing him to... as an admiral, that means that he was able to master not just one ship, but a fleet of ships to come at his command. So it's a cute comparison to how he is in his element at war in the ocean with a huge man of war ship at his command. And yet when he's back on land, when it is peace and he doesn't have to be out in the ocean, he's just an ordinary dude, and this ordinary dude cannot drive. He cannot drive, so his wife has to help him, like sometimes take the rein for him. Yeah, it's I'm sure it's very different to drive out in the woods when there's trees and carts and wagons to drive around than it is in the sea where it's just sea, Time Lord Boy says, is this not like a Mr. Darcy sort of act? Ooh, I'm glad you bring it up because I want to talk about that. Probably I don't want to talk about it yet because one day we are going to read Pride and Prejudice. I am taking us there eventually. But yes, this is definitely a Mr. Darcy being a little bit of a Mr. Darcy attitude, though for different reasons entirely. For Pride and Prejudice, Mr. Darcy was just being just too full of himself. Whereas in this one, literally, there's a reason for it. Wentworth is just sore that Anne gave him up. So, oh, you were joking about the weasel hunting. Ah, here I was ready to learn about weasels. Time Lord boy, I am disappointed. No, I'm not disappointed. Save the weasels. Try not to kill the weasels. I think the weasels deserve a life. The weasels deserve joy and contentment. Save the weasels. I'm sorry, you guys. All right, so don't think you have weasels in America. I don't know if we have weasels in America. I don't even know. What are weasels? I'm gonna look up weasels. American weasels. Please hold on. Types of weasels in North America. Here we go. Oh, how cute! This is a weasel. It is so cute. Okay. Look at this weasel. Aww. Wait. Oh. Weasel habitats and facts. Weasels found in different areas of North America. Weasels are long and thin. Oh my gosh, these are weasels? They're so adorable. Oh my gosh. They're so cute. I don't know, you guys. I think they're delightful. What? Charles, get back here. Don't you dare kill a weasel. Aw. Oh my gosh, look at this baby. Oh, so cute. Oh my gosh. The weasels are adorable. Please do not kill the weasels. I get it. I know there's farmers who might find them a pest, but if you can, please avoid harming the weasels. Oh, you guys. And Charles went after a weasel to go hunt it down. No, Charles, come back here. Come back here, Charles. Don't you dare harm the weasel. I mean, look at this baby. How could you want to kill this baby? Oh. Okay, so let's see. They're like ferrets, like rat type thing. Okay, says Time Lord Boyd. Red Tempest says, I think there was a Weird Al song about weasel hunting. I have to look it up. Noodle Something's Kimchi says, got to go, Magpie. Okay, take care. Hope you had fun. I need to hop on the treadmill and my airports. Okay, no problem, dear. I hope that you have a wonderful time on the treadmill. Yes, stay healthy. See you next time. Red Tempest says, at my high school, a science teacher had 2 albino weasels as pets. Like this baby, except this is not an albino, because if it were albino, it would have red eyes. But look at this baby. Oh. Weasels are so aggressive, though, says Noodle Something's Kimchi. Well, I say I leave the weasel alone, it'll leave me alone. So if we can just coexist, that would be lovely. Little Butterfly reminds us that they are rodents. Okay, why did you have to bring up that thing? Because now I'm thinking of the weasel if it's related to the rat or the mouse, then we can say that the Musgroves are the weasel and the mice are the haters. I don't know. That's kind of mean, but okay. Time Lord Boy, they are. But know how they are as pets. So they are aggressive. The least weasel delights me, right? The name least weasel. Least weasel, says Teal. I'm not sure why, but least weasel delights me. It delights me too. The smallest members of the weasel family. Aw, the weasel family. The critter averages 7 or 9 inches in length, including the tail. Oh my gosh, that's tiny. Oh my goodness, I have a ruler here. It's so tiny and precious, you guys. The least weasel is so tiny. And male weasels are typically larger than females. Unlike the aptly named long-tailed weasel, least weasels have tails that are quite short and do not have a black tip. They have brown-colored fur on most of their bodies, with the exception of the belly fur, which is white. Aw, has a white tummy. Oh, how cute. Still, my favorite might be this weasel, the short-tailed weasel. Because look at it, it's so cute. Though, I mean, all the weasels are adorable. Long-tailed weasel is cute. Okay, you guys, enough about the weasels. I have I have been sidetracked. Who knows? At this rate, by the way, these weasels have just captured my fancy. I may change my name to the Chattering Weasel or something. Just kidding. I am not aggressive and I am not a pest. And yeah, so I am still your one and only magpie. Don't worry. So, you guys, this is the end of today's read along. I hope you had a fun time. You enjoyed the read. Join me on Friday. I'm not sure if it's going to be in the morning or in the evening. Still not sure there, but do be on the lookout. I will announce it on my Discord or on Twitter, or just keep your notifications on. If you are enjoying these chit-chats, oh gosh, sorry, I'm still stuck with my little spiel from all the chit-chats I do on the other channel. If you are enjoying these read-alongs, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Share them with your peeps and tell them that there's somebody out there in the world who is reading wonderful books, and you should also read, and they should also read them. Until then, you guys, until Friday, you guys, I hope you have a wonderful rest of the day. Time Lord Boy says it's illegal in the UK, but it still goes on. What? Hunting them? And Red Tempest says weasels for life, LOL. Yes, read-alongs you mean. I know, I'm sorry. I'm still caught up in that. Join me for the next read-along on Friday, you guys. And then we can see what else happens between Anne and Wentworth. Ooh, something's bound to happen soon, you guys. Things have been set up for something, so we'll see what that something is. Just a little hint. Road trip. Okay. I hope that is tantalizing enough for you to join me. See you guys on Friday. Take care, everybody. Bye-bye.